Okay, cool. We're up and running. It's Mike and Aldo, Free the Hunter here. By the sounds of it, we're both disorganised today because time's flying by because of Christmas. How you doing, Aldo?
It's year end.
Um,
Doing great, doing great. It's just like time flies, and then here we are. It's year end, and I'm just looking back at the status of our project, and it's just like how sometimes we talk about, oh, we're gonna do this, and all of a sudden we're just getting it done. It's just there's a flow. There'll probably be like 1 week we skip, but at the same time there's a flow, and that's important.
yeah,
Um, so I'm pretty excited about the project and where it's going to be next year, how it's going to develop. Well, next year is really 2 weeks. So
yeah. Well, likewise. I mean, I actually, I may be from my point, my side, I don't see it as a flow at the moment. I see lots of broken flows for me personally.
yeah,
Because I go through little phases where, I mean, I think for when we first started this, my attention was totally consumed by it all. And everyone I talked to, this was all I talked about.
right.
ADHD, the podcast, what it all means, all that sort of stuff. And then I started getting questions from my mum. Oh, are you still doing that podcast?
Mm.
And I said, yeah, of course. Why? Well, you just haven't talked about it for a few days.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a pattern that people recognize in me is like, I'm all or nothing.
Right, right.
So
Well,
actually,
I'm the same way, man. I mean, I start to think like I'm getting to know you more as well. Of course, I met you early in the year, and I just think that what you might interpret as, oh, I have this, potential AD. And meanwhile, a lot of people have that. I mean, I'm the same way. I get involved into something deep, and then I come out of it, and I go into something else
yeah,
deep.
yeah,
Many people buy books. I'm reading like 8 books at the same time, and
yeah.
and I'm okay with it too. I don't have to read and finish one all in.
Well,
It's just,
this is part of what I want to get to in the end. Actually, is that um, I think what we know as ADHD,
mm-hmm.
and yeah, I think was it in the last one or the one before we talked about those diagnostic symptoms, and that's all they are is a list of diagnostic
Right,
symptoms
right.
which can be observed.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that we have to remember here is that there is nothing physiological. There's no physiological diagnosis within this. It's a set of behaviours,
Right.
and there's an assessment of whether those behaviours are impacting someone's life beyond what would be normal.
Right.
So I'll give you an example is that, someone might be late. Now, we're all late sometimes. There are some people who live by being punctual.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fair few people, I would say, who, it's not always the case. But then there are some people who are late and they lose their job because of it,
Mm-hmm.
or they lose their relationship because of it. And I'm guessing that it's taking that normal behavior and it's moving it to the extreme where it starts seriously impacting on someone's life.
Mm.
In terms of the diagnostic criteria, I started watching a webinar on attitude, which is for those of you who don't know, attitude is one of the most well-established resources on ADHD. So there's a lot of good stuff on there. So I'll put a link to that. But it was talking about how insufficient those diagnostic criteria are in terms of recognizing what ADHD is. And I think we're still actually in a massive field of discovery here.
Right.
But I also think I want to believe I listen to some of the various people that talk about that actually it isn't a condition. It's just it's part of being human. It's a personality type, if you want to call it a type, because we as humans we seem to want to categorize things.
Right.
But it's like anything. Everybody has muscles. Some people have stronger muscles than others, and we know that we can train those muscles. Someone might be able to train to the extent of Arnold Schwarzenegger, someone else might not. Likewise, the way we think, the thinking patterns, etc. Everybody can get in the flow. Everybody can get stressed and emotional. Everybody can rationalize. The ability, the way we can do that can be affected by training, but can also be affected by our genetic inheritance and our genetic potential. And I think there seem to be certain design traits. I like taking this back to evolution, because I think the problem with the current criteria are that it assumes that today's environment is normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's how people operate within today's environment that decides whether you have the disorder or not. Now, on the face of it, that seems fair enough, because it's today's environment that we've got to be able to operate in. The problem with it is if you take a Formula One Grand Prix car, no matter what environment you stick to it, there's a way of looking after and driving that Formula One Grand Prix car.
Yeah.
Doing the daily shopping run to Morrison's is not going to do that car any good. Much as you may need to do the daily shopping run to Morrison's, and you may need to do it in that car. But the problem that we're doing is, I think, that we're doing the daily shopping run in a Formula One Grand Prix car, and we could use any. I'm just picking on that because I like Formula One Grand Prix.
No, I like that.
But we're doing it. We're driving to Morrison's and we're stopping and starting at the traffic lights, and we're going around these really tight bends and having to do reversing around the corner and 3-point turns. And my Formula One Grand Prix car ain't designed for that.
Right.
It was built for a racetrack. You know, and racetracks have long sweeping bends. Yeah, they have chicanes and there's the odd U-bend here and there. But it's meant to drive very, very fast, be able to brake very, very quickly and accelerate very, very quickly. But it's not meant for chugging around in traffic and trying to park in a shopping mall.
Yeah.
But what we're doing is we're saying that the Formula One Grand Prix car has a disorder because we're getting niggly little problems. The clutch is going, the brakes are too thick, the suspension's too stiff,
right?
The speed bumps down the road and stuff like that. Well, what a surprise, it wasn't designed to go over speed bumps. But because that's where it finds itself, it's got a disorder.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking, like, let's just say I'm that car.
Yeah.
Right. Let's just say I'm the car. I'm that fast car. So one, I have to know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's two parts of this equation in terms of trying to, and I don't want to say use the word fit in, but to make things work.
Yes.
For both parties. Is one is like I have to know myself and understand my behaviors, see if it is ADHD related or not, or ADHD like.
Mm-hmm.
So I really know who I am, is like who I am and what I'm all about, and so really I need to understand me. The other thing is that the other counterpart, let's just say it's a boss, or it's a future job.
Mm-hmm.
In that interview, well, even before the interview, the company itself, whoever's on the other side of that that table that's going to interview, they need to understand the differences in people as well.
Yes.
That not everybody, they need to understand the organization.
Yeah.
They need to understand the people themselves and understand as well, behavior, ADHD like, or having it and understand the strengths and weaknesses and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And to see when you actually do have that interview, expectations are set as to what is the definition of success in that organization, and then both meetings of the minds have to agree what that definition of success, because if that definition of success is not discussed up front, then, or those expectations are not discussed up front, then what happens is once they actually, let's just say the employee starts working and all of a sudden it's like, oh, what do you mean I have to be here at 7 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah.
Well, there's one thing in terms of having let's say a family challenge, or, I have to take my kid to the babysitter, whatever it is, or is it that, it could be 7:30, sometimes 8. I'll try to be here at 7. I know you want me to be here at 7, but maybe 7:30 is that, or is the boss is going to say, well, you have to be here at 7:30. You cannot be late.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to have that understanding of what does it mean to be successful? Is lateness a priority? So that's like one chunk of understanding that needs to be discussed up front. And then I think the other thing is that, these days, organizations are evolving as we speak, right? It used to be, a hierarchy and here's the CEO and things like that, but not much more organizations, especially now and these days with the new generation. I think the millennials, they get a bad rap. They have a certain way of doing things. They're very effective. They just don't need the whole bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Whereas the old school people, let's just say myself, we like the bureaucracy. We like, structure and things like that. But the new generation, they don't like that. And they can't work in that environment. Meanwhile, they can deliver solutions much more effective than someone who is in a bureaucratic, organization as well. So there's a lot of things going on here. And that's why I'm fascinated by, this topic in general.
It is incredibly complex. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head, I think, with the understanding that people, the hunter types, the ADHD types, still need to be able to fit in today's world. But I also think the rest of people in society, also, the better they can understand, the better we can all understand each other, the better we can all collaborate together.
Right.
And those expectations you talked about. I had an interesting conversation with a friend yesterday, someone I hadn't seen for a while. And he was asking what you're doing, and I sort of explained the whole ADHD possible realization and the story of that, and then talking about the podcast. And I was talking about the different behaviors, and then he suddenly goes, "Oh, I think there might be someone I know like that in my family." And all right, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden he goes, "So, Mike, how do you get someone who's ADHD? How do you get them to tidy their room?" And it's like, because this room's a state, and it's like, it's terrible. I can't let his friends come round or anything like that because it is absolutely hideous, and it's my house. And I sort of, having been in that situation myself on the receiving end, or not the receiving end, but the messy person end,
right?
I sort of like, I felt in quite a difficult situation. It was very interesting because it was understanding. One, for me, when I was saying, well, just shouting at that person or demanding it or etc. doesn't work, or it certainly didn't work for me. Yes, in the short term, I may have tidied my room when my mum went absolutely ballistic at me.
Right.
But I'm 51 now. And I mean, I won't show you this, but it is still a tip. It's like,
show us. Sorry. Hey, you know what?
I don't even actually have a lot to get messy at the moment, so it's not. I mean, but yeah, it's. But the interesting thing for me is that when I need to, and when the urge is there, I will tidy it. But what I don't seem to be able to do is tidy it on a regular basis, keep it consistent, or do it to someone else's demand. If it's my place, if I'm going to someone else's place, I will keep that tidy.
Right, I get it. Yeah.
And it's very bizarre in that sense. And we had quite a long, intense discussion about this. And I don't think I was that helpful in that. I was suggesting, the first thing I was suggesting was that he needed to change his approach, but he felt very hard done by. Well, it's my house, we have standards, why should I change my approach?
Right.
Type of thing. And we sort of, we got to a point where we were actually like, this is just a really difficult situation. And I should have said, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is yet. But I have some clues from some of the stuff I've read, and it's just some of the things I've seen with my work with children and with Lisa and her daughter and stuff like that, is that one, I think we have to manage our expectations. When we realize that something like this is going on, and we may or may not realize, we tend to use terms like lazy, naughty, disobedient. They by anyone will be perceived as judgmental.
Right.
one of the keys, one of the things that seems to differentiate ADHD type people is that they are actually more emotional than most. They have the same emotions but stronger, but they may hide those emotions. You might not see them. So typically ADHD people have low self-esteem, and that's continually reinforced by people telling them that they can't do things or they're inconsistent. You know, you did it last week, why can't you do it this week? You know, I've just asked you to do this, why can't you do this?
Right.
And the problem is they don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, the video that I shot on the London Reel thing, which was quite traumatic for my parents and stuff to watch that, I will post that on Free the Hunter, and we can maybe watch it together and then pass comment on it again. And I've been showing this little by little to people, because it was a time where I felt like I was really, really very raw with the emotions, and that my views on people's expectations came out in that video. And I think that's something that what will happen is that I hid it. Some kids don't hide it, or they come out with an angry reaction which doesn't actually show the person that's telling them off what they're actually feeling. And I think I think everybody actually uses anger in that way. Marshall Rosenberg, and this is how I came to the book, The Drummer and the Great Mountain. Marshall Rosenberg developed a method of communication, but also values in life, a fundamental philosophy called nonviolent communication. And I think we talked about this in some of our groups. So it was actually Carlos and Michael that introduced me to that. And he's basically saying you can't force anyone to do anything. But because if you do, there will be consequences to it. On a day-to-day basis, this is what we are doing with our kids, with the best of intentions.
Right.
That's what we're doing. We're forcing them to do things, and they will find ways, if they are so inclined, to get around that if they feel that they can't do it. So they might do it, but they might resent it. So the consequences, the resentment and the follow-ups to that. Or they might not do it and try and hide it, or they might not do it and not try and hide it. And just be plain confrontational. And this is where the psychologists and the psychiatrists have come up with the term oppositional defiance disorder. The problem for me being, and this became very, very apparent in this conversation last night and with my mum and my ex-wife and everything, is that our not opposing, but our different belief systems and what we feel are massively influencing what we're saying. So my friend was adamant that he had standards and he could not have people in his house, even if it was just in his son's bedroom. His son's thinking, well, it's my bedroom. I don't know what his son's thinking because I haven't talked to him about it, but it was like, but having been there myself, my thoughts for me was when my mum said this to me, it was like, well, it's my bedroom. What's it got to do with you? You know, I'm your son. I don't have a choice. I can't buy a house. So this is my home as much as it's your home. So treat it as my home. That's how I felt about it. Now, as obviously with age and experience, I can see actually, you know, my approach was very, very upsetting to my parents, but likewise their approach was very, very upsetting to me. And the problem with that is like, who's right, who's wrong? Well, there is no right or no wrong. The point is, we want to try and resolve the conflict with all parties doing their bit willingly, in an ideal world. And I'm not sure you can do that if one party feels like they've been forced into something.
Well, it's interesting because you know, just this morning, you know, my wife, she has a different approach to getting my son to do things. So my son is not an eater. You know, he you know, mom makes him a pancake, Mickey Mouse pancake. Well, he doesn't like Mickey Mouse because he's now 5 years old. So now he gets his pancake, cuts it up, whatever, and then, but he's not hungry. and he doesn't want to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he should eat. Mom knows he should eat, but she's like, you got to eat your food. You got to eat food. And I'm like, would you stop telling him that? You're telling him that every 30 seconds, every minute. Stop doing it, because he's not going to eat. He's doing the opposite. Or if he eats, he takes one bite and it goes really slow, right? Really slow. I don't know if he's doing it wrong. Mess with her or whatever it is, right? And then I get upset because she keeps on, you got to eat. You got to eat. I'm like, look, he heard you. Stop it. So here we are. And, and then mother-in-law is there. So she's listening to this. And so there's one conflict between mom and my son. And then there's one conflict between her and myself, because now we're raising our voices. And then I'm getting upset because now I'm raising my voice and I don't like doing that. And that's not me. But she's getting me upset. Now she's getting upset. So, and then meanwhile, you want to resolve it, but you can't at that moment because emotions are up.
Yes.
And then mother-in-law is, she says her, a couple of words, and I'm like, I'm going to be 100% respectful. But in reality, it's just like at that moment, now it just comes heated up. So you have to like let it go. Right. But, and then the previous day, I wasn't there because I had to, leave. And so she's like, well, yesterday, after, hounding him, he ate the food. And I'm thinking, but that's not, so it's just like, now I'm concerned, like when I'm not home, what happens in the morning before he goes to school? This is like stress, first thing in the morning before the kid who's just turned 5 goes to kindergarten. Right? I don't need that stress. I mean, when I go to work in the morning, I remember that stress, taking that subway. And the last thing I need is somebody screaming at me, my own mother, and then she's not screaming it to the top of her voice, just like constant nagging, eat food, do this, do that. And then it's like, put your clothes on, whatever it is, right? So I'm pretty sure this happens in many households.
Yeah.
But it's just that level of intensity of stress. Like the last thing we need at home is stress to a 5-year-old, and it's already happening at a young age, and it starts at home.
Yes.
I'm not sure how to solve for that. I'm just like,
no. I don't think we have. Well, certainly between the two of us, we don't have that answer yet. Maybe there are people out there who do have those answers, and that's hopefully what we'll find in terms of our investigations and stuff like that. So anyone who does happen to be listening and has had success on this front, we'd love to hear from you.
I mean, it's just like, as adults, we should be able to like act as a coach and say, okay, you know what, let me try to figure out a different way.
Well, coaching's an interesting that you mentioned that is because I think one thing that as humans we tend to be, and I've been very much like this, my dad was very much like this. I'm trying to not fight it, but try and change it a bit. Coaching is about asking questions and get the person to resolve the issue for themselves. Whereas guidance and instruction and teaching is all about giving the instruction, giving the advice, and expecting the other person to take it on board. Coaching is, sports coaching is slightly different. I think sports coaching is like, this is what you need to do type thing. And I'm not sure it is actually coaching, but coaching in business now and coaching in health and well-being, there's a whole new field. I'm not sure how backed in science it is, but it is very much about, Aldo, you've discussed this problem. So what do you think you can do? And then maybe dig into more questions. What's the root of it, etc., so that you're guiding the person through their own resources,
right?
Whatever those resources may be, whether it's memory, skill sets, whatever. And I think that's part of the problem, is that we are far too prescriptive, and we believe we know what is right for everyone. So this interesting question is like, for me, I wrote it down the other day, and I needed to write it down. Do you as a parent want to do what's best for your child, or do you as a parent want to do what you think is best for your child? There's a really subtle difference there. Nice. Because even in doing the first one, if you assume that there are other people who know, you're still thinking it's best. But you will have, my dad had an idea that what was best for me was to go to school, go to university, get a job. That's what he knew. and he intensely believed that. And my whole family in India believes that, and there are many people here who believe that as well. The child, some children accept that and take it on board, and it may or may not be the right thing.
Right.
We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The child may think he knows what's best, that he or she knows what's best for them, and they hate school and they don't want to go to school, and they want to do this, that, and the other. And some kids will get through that. And you have, I mean, Bono, lead singer of U2, he got put back a year in school. So that's how well he did at school. Look where he ended up.
Mm-hmm.
Simon Cowell hated school. Albert Einstein hated school. There's a long, long list of people whose education really didn't help them, other than maybe gave them the stimulus to say up yours to the system. Now, I'm not saying that we dump school, because I think clearly school is a good place for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're in a world where we should be able to find out, we should be able to be more flexible. You know, given the billions we spend on space research, energy research, the military, all of this stuff, that actually the education, and I think broadening the remit of what education is it supplying a set of premeditated information that someone believes is what our children should know?
Right.
Bear in mind that this is different in every single country you go to.
Yep.
No one country believes that all the, you know, not one country agrees with another country and what everyone should know.
Right.
Or do we think, like, you know, we should be giving our children the tools to be able to discover how to make the best of themselves?
And it's interesting because now with everything that's going on in today's economy, right, everything's changing so fast.
Mm-hmm.
The pace is intense,
yes.
Right? Industry is just like being torn apart, right? Technology's coming in, everybody's like different mindset. Before, everybody wanted to work in certain industries. Now it's like, forget about those industries, we're gonna go to these other industries. And meanwhile, like, here we are trying to deal with like some basic stuff, like basic things in education system. Like a country is trying to define their education system, thinking like what you're saying, like this is what's best for these kids. But what do they know, right? That's like the older generation structure and things like that. Meanwhile, you know, when they're preparing their kids for the future, well, which future? Is it the adult future, or is it today's future, right? It's a different future, different rules are applied. You know, there's things that the kids need to do differently and think differently, even act differently. You know, things like being in front of the camera, being a public speaker, being able to influence. That's important these days. Maybe not as important as before. Before you had to like memorize something and say something a certain way and look a certain way and go to the right, so be proper, and maybe that would help you be successful. But now it's different. So, you know, meanwhile, like the decisions that you make as to, okay, this is what you should learn at an early age, and, you know, you're basically sometimes setting them up for failure, right? Or setting them up to limit themselves as to what they can and cannot do. So, and of course, you know, with the limited resources and limited money and limited time. And so as a parent, I would think something like understanding the depths of these conversations that we're having now, again, getting to know who they are as people, getting to understand what the world is requiring these days, this digital economy, and then being able to make sense of things and be able to manage things correctly. That's you know, if you're not fast enough or quick enough to really understand that, it's going to be too late, because before you know it, the kid's already 7, they're already 8, 10, and the behavior or habits or life habits already becoming formed. It's already too late.
Yeah. And that is right. I mean, life is changing so much, and I think there are certain fundamentals that we need to change on, to focus on. You're absolutely right about the digital economy and all of this. Things are changing so fast, though. I mean, if you think about the rate of change of technology in the last, 10 years ago, the internet was something. It wasn't what it was today. 20 years ago, the internet was there, but bloody hell, it was hard work. It was really hard to use, and the majority of people. Now it is the be all and end all of everything that we do. You know, you're in New York, I'm here via the internet. It is just an integral part. It's just like a road, you know,
Right.
in terms of its commonality. You drive a car down the road, we drive information over the internet. But how quickly is that changing? And is that rate of change? I mean, who could have predicted where we would be now 10 years ago?
No one.
And if that rate of change, even if it stays the same, it's going to be difficult enough to predict where we're going to be. If it increases, which I believe it will increase, we haven't got a hope in hell. And kids born in 2000 will be working in 2050, in another 30 years' time.
Yeah.
And we haven't got a clue what that world's going to be like. Is it going to be VR? Are we going to be flying around in cars? Or if Elon Musk has his way, are we all going to be driving underground? What is the effect of driving underground and not having sun? You know, will we be driving, or will we just be being piloted everywhere by automatic pilot?
Thing, right? Before, in our generation, and I want to say our generation, just in general, just people like, they can't wait to drive their car for the first time. I have my car, this and that. Meanwhile, and I think like this as well. I don't want to drive the car. You drive the car. Let somebody else drive the car. Let me do my thing. Mm-hmm. Let me study. Let me do this. Let me read. Let me engage in my social media. You know, or let me engage in whatever I'm doing. Right. But you waste your time and drive, because that's like mechanical. Like, why should I care about making a left turn, a right turn, moving forward, moving backward, watching things to get from point A to point B, and it's going to take an hour. I just wasted that 1 hour doing absolutely nothing except doing something mechanical.
Navigating your environment.
Yeah. I'd rather do something that's much more challenging my intellect, or maybe spending time on the phone with someone, developing a relationship. That's more meaningful. So why would I even want to drive a car?
Yeah, and there is all of that, and there are all of these arguments out there. But likewise, I think we're moving more and more away from a world of movement,
right,
and an intellectual world, and moving towards this intellectual world. Do you ever listen to Gary Vaynerchuk? Yeah. So I mean, he's a big technology man, and he talks about this, and he's buying heavily into virtual reality, or was at the last webinar I looked at. And it's like, you know, and I've read about this, that the nervous system doesn't understand whether something is real or not.
Right.
It takes in electrical data. That electrical data currently, generally for you and I, comes in through our eyes, our ears. So it comes in as often as light vibrations, electromagnetic frequencies, but it may also come in as sound vibrations. I don't know if on a TED talk they saw this thing about sensory substitution, and they were able to digitize analog photos and things like that, and then tap out the picture on a guy's back through a jacket. And over time, this guy was able to tell them what this picture was about. So it's like we may well end up just being brains plugged into stuff. I don't know. Yeah. But for now, we're not. But going back to the education system, we need to be able to talk. We need to be able to communicate with each other. I think we need to have some sense of numbers, especially whilst we have to deal with money. Mm-hmm. After that, why do we need information when pretty much anything we need is at the touch of a button? You need to be able to find information, and you need to be able to tell whether it's any good or not. But do you need to know it? I don't know. I think,
Well, I mean, so I agree with that. So I'm reading a book just this week I picked up. It's called The Attention Merchants by Tom Wu. And it talks about how industry, for the past 100 years in different forms has, tried to get your attention, people's attention. And then now with the intensity of how social media is so embedded in our day-to-day, and the way we're liking things and subscribing to things. So we're very selective as to the things we like. We're providing that feedback into, let's just call it the system. Then the system gets to know who we are, and then knows what we like and tells us what we like, right? It doesn't challenge us to think, because it's just telling us what we like. And then therefore it's going to offer us products and services that we potentially can buy, because it gets to know us.
Yeah,
You know,
and likewise on the political side of things, you tend
correct,
to get comments from like-minded people the whole time. So we built
correct,
up these incredible biases over
right.
time. The intention thing you mentioned, just bringing us back to ADHD, because we wandered off
No,
there.
and what I'm saying, my question was to you. It was in addition to everything that's going on, right? Because if things were to not move so fast, it's like, okay, now you can spend some time and maybe spend like 1, 2, 3 months and be able to, learn, educate. All
Mhm.
parties learn. Everyone gets educated. So we kind of like have opportunity to stop and then from there reassess and then calibrate and then from there move forward, right? And then say, okay, these are the changes that we need. But we don't have the attention span. So someone with ADHD or someone with ADHD tendencies, like how do they survive in today's world, right? If
Well, interestingly, this is what I wanted to come to. Was it's called ADD is attention deficit disorder, ADHD attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and according to the DSM manual stuff that we looked at the other week, they talk about an inattentive. Are you ADHD inattentive, ADHD hyperactive, or ADHD combination? But actually, when you talk to ADHD people, it's not that they can't hold attention. It's they can't hold attention on stuff they're not interested in. What they can do very well and almost better, I believe, than non-ADHD people is something they're interested in. They can hold attention fantastically well. So much so that they will forget meetings, appointments, this, that, and the other, because they're so engaged in what they're doing.
Yeah.
And in fact, I just read on just before we came on here, the Attitude webinar mentioned that ADHD people tend to get into flow, that optimum mindset, 3 to 4 times every day.
Right.
So again, this is perspective. This is the big misunderstanding of ADHD, because it's always defined. If you go back to the hunter-farmer theory, ADHD has been defined by farmers. These are basically the people who won't do what the farmers want. Yeah. Hunters, on the other hand, if they were to define ADHD, there would be nothing to define, because that's their life. That's just the way I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, for me, perspective is a really big thing. It's like, who's saying this? You know, one person says technology is great because it frees us all up to pursue our leisure interests.
Right.
Person says, yeah, but with all this technology, it's taking all our jobs. And so I don't have the money to pursue my leisure interests.
Right.
So for every side, every coin has two sides to it.
Yeah.
And ADHD has been defined by people who see it as a disorder. By defining it as a disorder, it behooves a certain approach. You have to correct it. Whereas if you look at it as a design function, an assumption, and this, if you look at everything that's happening with humans, and I think about this with illness and design, with cancer and stuff like that, if you look at what's happening, especially if we've got genes for it, because evolution is quite a specific, if random, process. If you believe what they say, it's like, genes don't survive for no reason. They had a reason. So okay, so what was this body designed to do? Okay, it's not, somehow things are going wrong now. Is it the body? Is it the human being? Or is it its interaction with the environment? And it goes back to the Formula One Grand Prix racing car driving around in city traffic, or is it driving around an Indy 500 track? It's like, where does it want to be? So in terms of practicalities for the individual, it's not going to solve all the problems, because basically I think that farmer mentality is pretty well ingrained in our world. And all the rules and regulations. I think society needs that to a certain extent. We need that. And if the world was all hunters in today's size of world, hunters work well in small groups, but in terms of 30 million in a city,
yeah,
I think it's pretty chaotic. So, but then it's recognizing, well, actually, how can that individual, how can the hunter make the best of themselves? How can society make the best of the farmer and the hunter? And many people do this automatically. Richard Branson is probably one of the most famous people who's credited with being ADHD. Well, yeah, I don't think anyone's going to say he's an unsuccessful business person. Right. He's had lots of puppets, but he's up there with one of our top entrepreneurial figureheads.
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah. But he clearly has other people doing all the stuff that he can't or won't do.
Right, right.
Yeah. So I'd like to say we got our first. I got a message from a guy in Sweden, Mikael, who's found out the YouTube channel and the podcast, and he's very similar situation to me at the moment, and he says he's looking for a Swedish Aldo. Because he's recognized that he can't do everything on his own, and I sort of we've been messaging over the last couple of days and explained that you're helping to keep me on track with all of this. Just having you there gives me someone to be accountable to.
Right.
So and it gets us, and this is the great thing. We know that there are certain things. So I work best when I'm working for someone, but on something that I'm interested in.
Yeah. No, and not only that, but I remember when you mentioned the book, right? And I'm like, okay, you have to write. I know it's hard to write. I love to write. I love to read. I love to write, but I know that I'm not consistent. I'll write for 1 or 2 pages, and then I'm like, sometimes I'll get stuck.
Yes.
Something that's me, right? I'm not saying I'm perfect, but then it's like, so if I'm thinking like, well, what about Michael Paul? What if he gets stuck or doesn't even get to start? Oh, so the intention is there, but to actually realize, what you're looking to do to accomplish, I'm thinking like the only way to really do it in my mind is like, well, let's try a different approach. Let's just, because we can engage in conversations relatively easy.
Exactly.
Press the record button and let's just go with it. Because if you plan it, it's never going to get done.
Yeah.
The only way you actually do it, you're going to do it is by just doing it.
Yeah.
And just meet, get on the call, have a couple of ideas, and then from there you just do it, and then the project moves forward.
Yeah, and that's the, and you're not the first person to say that. I remember a friend and I went to see a web designer and stuff, and we were chatting away, and we just sort of said, and our crap stuff is we're no good at marketing. We know our stuff, but we're no good at pushing it. And he just subtly. He said, oh, well, tell me, what do you do? It's like, just talk to me about it. And he just pressed record on his phone without me noticing. And I went on and told him what I could do with him in his workplace and all of that. And I got quite excited about it. And at the end of that, he just said, just do that. You don't need to plan marketing. You don't need to do that. Here's a recording. This is what you do. And you're saying exactly the same thing, and because I've heard it, it's like one of these things. Like we need so many times for people to say that for us,
right?
To then kick in. It's like the sales message. How many contacts do you need to sell something? And that's like, for me, I'm a bit slow and dense on all of this stuff. And actually, that's what I like. I love talking about it. So this is the other clue for the ADHD person, depending on where they're at. In an ideal world, and this is the ideal world for anybody, and this is why I say it's not about ADHD, it's about, for all of us, finding the job that suits our personality.
Right, I agree.
Or finding the career, and it may not be a job, it may be that actually working for someone else, you can't do that because of your views and you're too outspoken, whatever, you say the politically incorrect thing the whole time, you just can't take instructions from somebody else. I know lots of people like that. So then you think, well, I run my own business. If you're running your own business, I know 2 or 3 people, myself included, who we have great ideas and stuff, but we can't follow through with the mechanics of running the business.
You just reminded me of this gentleman that I worked with in the past, and this guy's like, I don't want to say hot-headed, whatever it is, but the guy is like intense, right? Intense. And then a lot of people that he would deal with, he's like, well, how come you didn't do this? I told you to do this and you didn't do it. And then I sent you the email and you didn't do it. And I asked you about it. Didn't you receive my email? And really intense and hammering people to get things done, right? Because other people are much more like, well, I got other things to do. This is not a priority for me. So it's low priority, but from his mind and his mindset, it was high priority. Yeah. And it is high priority because, just to keep, we're in like the high frequency trading space. So everything's high priority there. You don't want to mess around. If something goes wrong there, it goes wrong in a major way. So his personality, his mindset was perfect for the product, high frequency trading.
Yes.
But for the rest of the world, like the whole banking things, like, this is the way we're going to do things, conference calls, and that's a different mindset. They don't get the necessity, the risks around high frequency trading. But between him and I, we got along because I knew exactly what he was at in terms of mindset. He was dead right on everything he was saying in terms of the messaging. But the people that he interacted, they just didn't want. He was too intense for them. Yeah. So for me, every time management would approach me, it's like, "What do you think of this guy?" I'm like, "The guy's brilliant. You just got to let him do his thing. Yeah. Just put him over there in that room over there, and just let him do his thing. And I'm telling you, the guy delivers. Yeah. But it's just too much friction." And eventually it just didn't work out. He ended up moving to another firm. Another firm who would value a person like that and would just leverage his knowledge and his intensity.
Yeah. So it's understanding then that his abruptness, his abrasiveness comes about through his passion.
Right.
And his frustration that things aren't happening, and to recognize it as that rather than take it personally.
Correct.
And this is what a lot of people do, is they take this stuff personally, and I do it as well, but I'm learning, I'm understanding now that actually this person's passionate about this stuff, because I've done it to enough other people. I've taken their heads off about stuff and they're like, whoa, but it was because I was really, really passionate about it. Right. And it struck a chord. Now, obviously over time, there's this whole idea that, well, you learn not to upset people the whole time. Some people are very good at that, others aren't.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why you need that self-awareness,
Yeah, exactly.
So I could take someone who's like that and who is passionate about something. I'll take a guy with a passion, but then pisses people off, as opposed to someone that is just like knows everything, but the guy just like doesn't give a shit. Right. And I'd rather have someone with passion, right? And I'll deal with that. And then everyone has to like step up their game too, because you get a guy like that, you get him in the organization, everybody's on their toes, right? You want that, right? And that article that I forwarded you, is like, it talks about that, right? How you have a group of kids and you got one group of kids, and they go more into the detail, but it's like you got one group, one person, one child who has ADHD or some ADHD
type behavior. Yeah.
How that group in the end was able to get things done versus another group that just has like no ADHD, kids. And that was, I found really interesting, because.
Well, let's expand on that, because I think it'd be useful. We'll put the link for that study in the show notes. But essentially what we saw, it was a group studying what would be the effects of including someone with ADHD in a problem-solving group along those lines. So they had, I think, 6 or 7 control groups of a small handful in each, no ADHD type people. And then they had a similar number of groups with one ADHD type person in there. And if my memory serves me correctly, they weren't properly diagnosed. They weren't on medication, because that would have.
Oh, that's right. That's key.
That would have mediated the effects of the ADHD. So they were included on observations of their prior behavior. Excuse me. Now, the prediction was that the groups with the ADHD person in would spend less time on task, and the ADHD person would act as a disruptor. Mm-hmm. So, maybe people would argue, maybe people would get off topic, this, that, and the other. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, according to the paper, the researchers were dead on. That's exactly what happened. Mm. The control groups, all worked solidly on their problem. The experimental group didn't. They argued, they talked about other stuff, they got off track, this, that, and the other. And so these researchers concluded that, well, this is the effect of ADHD. ADHD people are disruptive and take people off task. Now, on the face of it, that sounds not good for the ADHD person, not good for the non-ADHD. You don't want them. But what they didn't report on, which somebody else, this is a guy who's written the article, Peter Gray, who's written a great book, Free to Learn, which I encourage everybody to read. Peter Gray noted, well, what about the results of the actual problem solving? What happened there? What did happen? The control group, no ADHD people, were on task the whole time. Not one single control group solved the problems. Okay, all right, let's see what happened. If they didn't get solved, there must have been bloody hard problems. So God helped the ADHD group, because they did work on task. The ADHD people were disruptive. I think, and we'll better look at the article for this. I think 6 of 8 groups in the experimental groups solved the problem. None out of 6 groups solved the problem. No ADHD person. 6 out of 8 groups, all with an ADHD disruptor, not working on task, being disrupted, solved the problem. Now, there were no discussions on why this may or may not have been. Peter Gray talks about his thoughts on it in the article. But this is another case of where research can be so misleading. And it's like, oh, are you there, Aldo? You seem to have gone. I'll carry on because...
No, I'm here.
Are you there?
No, I'm good. I'm here. Yeah.
The research can be so misleading because the original researchers will have just concluded, yeah, their theory worked. The guys were disruptive. People weren't working on task. But they missed the whole point. The outcome is actually, well, who solved the problems?
Well, you know what? It's funny you say that because so the gentleman that I was telling you about in the electronic trading high frequency space, the groups that managed that project before us continuously failed to deliver. Continuously failed to deliver. We got together. There's another gentleman as part of that group. We got together. We solved it. And we solved the problem, and it has to do with this gentleman, that his input, his intensity to go into the details and the things that we couldn't get done. The other 2 guys, and myself, that he was able to do it and got it done, and we were able to move forward with the project and close it. We went live with this real-time risk monitoring system, that we were able to accomplish it. And what the other group was doing, that they just, let's just say 10 line items. They were saying, if we can go live with these 10 line items, it'll be a success. We went live with about 1,600 line items, real time, different products. So we actually went live with the product. And that was because the gentleman that I was just mentioning to you, I'm not sure, it's just coincidence.
Yeah. Well,
but we needed that guy. I know that guy's valuable. I'm still friends with him too, but it was him that we got it done,
Oh, and Peter Gray talks about this in the article. He suggests that the non-ADHD people are all really good at what he calls in-the-box thinking. These are the standard ways of thinking. You always see it in the baddie films where they bring in the FBI. So I don't know if you remember Die Hard.
Yeah, I remember.
And Die Hard, and the guy, I can't remember his name now, but he's a fantastic actor. But
Bruce Willis?
Not him, the other one who played the baddie.
Oh, okay, I remember now. I forgot his name.
Played Snape in Harry Potter as well. And he's like, and he's sitting there, and they've got the FBI, and the FBI have their set procedures of how they deal with every problem that is a hostage situation. Cut the power, blah, 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 this will happen, that will happen, the hostages will give up, or the kidnappers and the heisters will give up. Well, this guy's ahead of the game. He says, well, I know all of your procedures, so I'm just going to work around them.
Right.
And so that your procedures won't work. And I'm going to be a successful burglar. And it was only the fact that Bruce Willis was there to throw a spanner in the works. And if you look at, this brings me back to creative people and their view on things. And I started writing a film list of things that I think could be seen as analogies or allegories of ADHD, or like, it was not just ADHD itself, but all of the neurodiversity, Asperger's, autism, all of these things. For me, every single mutant, come X-Men, heroes, all of those are all where there's a few people with special abilities, and there's the masses, and the masses are always really, really scared. They always want to get rid of the mutant capabilities.
Right.
The Divergent series, again, everybody was categorized into their particular abilities. Harry Potter, the same thing. Everyone's categorized into their different houses. But Harry Potter, interestingly, could have fitted into two, Gryffindor and Slytherin, and he was different. And he didn't think the same way as the other people. There were people who were very smart, this, that, and the other, but there was just something about him that was out of the box. Every detective thing always has a detective that thinks differently to all the rest of his police force. There's always one hero in all of these things, whether it's the female or the male, that puts pieces together that no one else manages to put together.
Well, I mean, now, like, you know, and I'm just thinking about, again, the same example in terms of any set of rules that are out there, right? You know, you got government trying to come up with this whole, everything that's coming out now with all this cryptocurrency, right? So cryptocurrency is basically someone that said, you know, like, look at the process, understand the process. Like, I want something different. I don't want to be part of the process. I want to override the process. They come up with this new this whole entire industry that's up and coming. This digital asset, cryptocurrency thing is just based on that. You know, the set of rules. I create my own rules. You know, because I'm against the system. And then now this new whole disruption approach to industry and ways of doing things is going to disrupt healthcare, finance, because of thinking outside the box. Which why I'm so intrigued by the whole thing. You know, I keep reading about it. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. I see how this is going to change things. You know? And again, you know, so I think my conclusion, you know, at least for today, is just that, and reading that article and everything that we're talking about, I think that anyone that has, you know, ADD or ADHD, in the sense that they'll be able to fit into this new environment, in a sense. Let me not use the word fit. They're going to be able to embrace it. Changes. I think they'll be able to, that car that can drive 100 miles an hour, you know, they're going to be able to get onto any, you know, ride or any process here and be able to, like, jump off and take off. I think they'll be able to win in this environment.
I think so too. I think this is, and this isn't going to be for apply to everyone. And I think this is the whole thing, is that we've got to recognize that there are some very, very bright people out there. And there are not such bright people, but we all have our place, and everyone's good at their own little thing. But I think you're right. In a world that looks for certainty and stability, yet is continually faced with change, we have agents of change. And I think the people who think outside of the box are the ones that are promoting change. And sometimes it's for good, sometimes it's not for good. And this is the same with everything. But I think for the individuals, from our point of view, from my point of view of believing that I'm one of these people, is that, okay, the most typical comment I get from people when I tell them about what I'm doing and how I feel about the education system, how ADHD people are treated and stuff like that, is, well, that's just it. That's life. You're never going to change the system. We're a medical-based system. We're a science-based system. We're a business-based system. You're not going to change that. And maybe I won't in my lifetime. I mean, to paraphrase Simon Sinek, you know, he doesn't believe he's going to achieve his goal in his lifetime. But if I can start changing perceptions and move to a place where we can all work together better and not be so fearful of each other, that would be a better place to be from my point of view. Will it guarantee better outcomes? Who knows? Outcome is, you know, depends on your perspective on life. And, you know, and I dare say the Rothschilds, although they, you know, do they fancy Bitcoin? You know, does Warren Buffett want Bitcoin because does he understand it?
Mm-hmm.
bottom dollar, he'll be trying to understand it fairly shortly. Um,
I
so,
think it's just as long as we continue doing this, but at the same time, of course, there's the marketing aspect of this, right? It's like, so it's great that we're having these conversations, but then the next phase, and we have to like think about how we're going to do this for,
yeah, so
2008. Like, okay,
started.
how do we pass this out? How do we get more people involved in conversations and to be good enough for it to be shared, by people on social media, because it's very powerful, to have these conversations. It's even more powerful because they're changing the algorithm in Facebook to actually have these conversations live as well. That's actually another thing that we can discuss about this, having people and having real conversations where people know that this Facebook Live is going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, we can also record it as well on Zoom, things like that but it's something to think about, the more it's live, and I've been experimenting on my side for different reasons. Facebook says, oh, we like the feedback here. They're gonna start prioritizing it and start pushing it out on people's, feeds,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets replayed all over again. So I've been experimenting on my side, and it's working. But with a topic like this, especially, and I know teachers as well, they'll be able to share it. I have people sharing my stuff now, but I'm pretty sure we have these conversations and we have it live, and people can listen in live, be able to provide feedback live. I think that's really special.
And I also think as well is that for people to find it useful and to want to use it is they have to see it as being a value to them and to help with their problems. So last night was really, really interesting because it was specific. It was a parent who, his child the child's actually more grown up now, but it's like hasn't been diagnosed with ADHD, but the behaviors were very similar to what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to know, how do I talk to this person? How do I get them to do what I want to do? What I want them to do, sort of thing. So there are families out there with specific problems. There are people like me, the guy I told you about in Sweden, near identical experiences over the last couple of years. And he's looked at this stuff and he's thought, oh, wow, that's really powerful. Now he feels he's got other people out there to share his journey with. Yeah. So, I think that's part of that. I guess that's the real thing where I wanted to do this. People had said I needed to do it with the cancer because I did things differently. And it worked. I'm still here when I shouldn't have been, according to the medical model and stuff like that, but I never got around to doing it. So this, with your help, is what I'm doing, is actually just sharing this journey, and we're both learning as we go along.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the point. And we'll be able to say, I'm looking forward to, where are we in 6 months' time?
Sure.
What have we got? So I think in terms of that, getting it out there, and anyone who is watching this, and I think we've got 13 subscribers so far to the YouTube channel, but there are quite a lot of views on Facebook, and interestingly, a lot of people are telling me they're watching them. Mm-hmm. Not everybody gets it. Another friend at the weekend said, Mike, your vlogs and your podcasts, they seem really intense and I just don't get it.
Okay.
We had a long chat about it and we came closer to it, but this isn't going to be for everybody. And this is the whole point. And I'm not here to sell it and convince the whole world to everyone. Yeah. I'm here to share my journey, and for those who see some value in it and resonate with it, and that's where it comes from. But I think in terms of
personally myself, before I met you, and I've heard of ADHD and things like that, and autism, but I'm thinking like, well, I don't have it. My kids don't have it, so it's not my problem. Right? That's kind of like, and then just brush it off. Anything is like, autism day and this and that. It's like, okay, whatever, right? Like, I'm busy, right?
Yeah.
So, but then once you start understanding it, or once you start knowing someone that has it and realize their struggles, then all of a sudden, like, if this is a friend of mine, I should understand it more. And then maybe when the person's struggling, I can be there for that person. Yeah. All of a sudden, like, your mindset changes. Then all of a sudden, it's like, realize, wait a minute, there's more people that has this, and there's a lot of people that have been in trouble as a result of this, all the conflicts that are out there. So maybe this is an important topic.
Yeah.
Right. So I think everything's important these days. It's just really understanding and being having some empathy, and then I think that'll grow.
Empathy is a key word here, and I think that's, if there was one word I could have for my friend who's struggling to deal with his son, is try and use empathy. Because at the moment, and I see this with my girlfriend's daughter, is that she doesn't have empathy for her daughter's situation. She only has her own situation in her mind when she's telling her to do stuff. And it's understanding where the other person is, showing that you understand, and that's the difficult bit.
Right.
And then approaching from that basis of understanding. Because when you approach from a basis of not understanding, I can pretty much guarantee you the barriers will go up.
Oh, sure.
And you're not going to get you. And that's the same with anyone. That's not an ADHD thing. I just think it becomes more apparent with ADHD, because I think ADHD people are going to react more strongly. That's what I think there. I don't know about you, but what I'd like to do is request to others, anyone who has or suspects they have ADHD, and maybe it's a couple with one person in or whatever. I think there's some really interesting dynamics to explore here. And I think there's a lot, because people don't understand, that actually seeing and hearing from real life people with ADHD or suspected ADHD, what they're feeling, thinking, I think that's a good way of, it's like my friend said, I think I know someone just like that, and he happens to be my son. Yeah, sure. And just by talking more about this and how we feel and the interactions that happen, but being able to look at it with more acceptance, less judgment.
Yeah.
And then can we find a way forward? So I think for the two of us, find people that we know or know, approach them. Do they want to come on? Maybe they want to, maybe it's a written interview, maybe they're not ready to go on camera. But, you know, just waiting to hit, you know, let's hear from more people. Let's talk about this stuff, because I think there are a lot of people out there who are hiding this stuff.
Yep.
And it's hurting not only them, but it's hurting the people around them because of that. So
I agree. No, let's do that. I think that's definitely a milestone for us to start getting more people involved on these conversations, and then be able to, you know, push it out there more and increase awareness. But not just awareness, because awareness is one thing, but also to engage. Right? We need to engage, because then we learn more as well. And then whoever's struggling with it, they're not going to be struggling by themselves anymore. You know, we'll be. They find it.
So one thing I said to Mikael from Sweden, Mikael, I don't know how to pronounce it in Swedish, was that a hope I have for this is that we build a community, and it's not just for ADHD people, it's for anyone who's touched by what we know as ADHD, so that we can help and understand each other better and get better outcomes. So cool. All right, I think that's probably a good point to leave it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm feeling much better now than I was beforehand.
That's awesome.
It's because I'm interested in it. And one last line of hope here for those of you who feel you have ADHD, and like me, sometimes you might feel really despondent and that everything's really overwhelming and you just don't want to get out of bed in the morning. On this webinar, I think it's a Dr. Dodson talks about this, says that if you ask most people with ADHD that they know they can do stuff, is there anything that they can't do? And in his experience, the answer he's getting is no, because when I get started, I can do anything. And that's the thing, is what will get you started, because once you can get started, then there's not a lot that will stop you, or it's keeping it going. So that it can be incredibly powerful. So we see it as a disability, a disorder the whole time. Let's change that thinking. Let's get out there. We can do stuff. Yes, there are challenges at the moment, but how do we reduce those challenges, and how do we get the plus side out of this? And I do appreciate that for some people at the moment, there's very little plus side. I know a couple of families where this has been really, really full of distress. And so I'm not wanting to belittle those feelings. And I don't have an immediate solution for those things, but there is a hope out there, especially, you know, for people in my situation, Mikhail's situation, the people I met at the ADHD support group. There are ways forward through this, and we can move in that direction. Cool. Till next time, Free the Hunter, Aldo and Mike.
All right. Take care, man.
All right.